Voices of the West. Today we are joined by author Malcolm Hotzman, uh, working on some brand new projects coming in here, stuff that's going to be very exciting that we're looking forward to learning about. Malcolm, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Kevin.
Oh, my pleasure indeed. From there, tell me a little bit about yourself. Let the audience get to know who you are.
Well, kind of in a thumbnail sketch here. I was born and raised in the Appalachian Mountains in southeastern Kentucky, Harlan County, and graduated high school and looked at the possibility of working in the coal mines because that's what the industry there was at the time. And I went to Chicago and worked for a while, and the big city just wasn't for me. So I went back to Kentucky and joined the Navy. Spent 8 years in the Navy. Got into repairing and installing CT scanners. That was my specialty. Did that for about 20 years, and then got a wild hair and went to nursing school and graduated as an RN in 2002. And I've worked as an RN. I'm technically retired right now, but I've worked off and on since I retired, but today I'm retired.
Excellent. Well, it's always good to finally get to the point where you can finally do something for yourself, maybe?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So what got you into Westerns?
Well, as I said, I grew up in the hills of Kentucky, and that's Daniel Boone country. I was close to the Cumberland Gap, which is where he came into Kentucky at. But I've always been interested in cowboys. Every little boy back there wanted to be a cowboy, and I always had the cap pistol, and I can still smell the smell from shooting those caps. And it's been 60 years since I did that, I guess, but I can smell it just like it was yesterday.
Almost leave a flavor in your mouth. Yes.
Absolutely. And, that was during the Bonanza Gunsmoke days. And we only had one TV channel, and we didn't get it real well, but we all crowded around it when one of those shows were on. I've always wanted to live out west, but just things have never worked out that way for me. So, but always been fascinated by it. I got to do some work in Arizona, Utah a few years ago, and my wife didn't think she was going to get me back. So just love that part of the country.
Excellent. What do you think it is about Westerns that appeals to people?
I think it's the simplicity of it, really. It's the purity of not being all rolled up in a bunch of technology. I deal mostly with traditional Westerns, not the Yellowstone, that sort of stuff, not the modern day stuff. But, when the only technology you have to worry about is whether the telegraph lines are operational and all, simplifies things a little bit. And it's always been, I think especially men love the challenge of man against nature, man against the animals you have to deal with, the good guys and the white hats and the bad guys and the black hats, that sort of thing. And it's just, a lot of people have talked about Star Trek being like a Western. They go off to the unknown frontier, and they, good guys and bad guys, and that's just a common theme, but it's so prevalent in traditional Westerns, and I think men are just drawn to that, and women as well. There's a lot of wild women out there during the earlier times, and very strong, that had very important contributions. It's just now coming out. They're getting a little more screenplay right now than they have in the past, I believe. So, and that's a good thing.
Absolutely. It's a lot of changes going on in the Western market, particularly in the last number of years, for what was officially a relatively dead topic for seemed like 10 years back from like 1990s, that kind of a thing. It's jumped back a lot. We've really had no real stop in movies coming out that are Westerns, but
and the ones that did were horrible, for the most part. There's some really bad, almost B-grade Westerns that they just didn't get it done, So I'm excited that things are rolling so much nicer now, and some good Westerns, some outstanding books being put out. I started my first one when I was gotten out of nursing school. So it's probably 2004 I started writing. I've written my whole life, but I never tried to really write a book. Started when I was about 10, and that didn't go anywhere. And then it took me, I think 2017 was when I finished it. Yeah, I'd write a little bit, stick it in a drawer, and a few months or years later, drag it back out and write a little bit. Then I retired. And I finished it, and I said, I don't know what to do with it now. So I sent it out, and publisher X accepted it and published it. And he said, well, write another one. So I did, and he published it. And then he and I just kind of had a falling out. And I didn't have a publisher. I'm sitting at home with some books and some ideas, and I get an email, and it's Bruce from Dusty's House, and I want you to talk to my publicist. We might be interested in bringing you on board, and that was 2018, and so I've been with DSP ever since then, and absolutely love the organization. It's a great place.
And your turnaround has certainly picked up a lot from going from 13 years to you're getting fairly regularly now. You've got a couple at least a dozen some odd novels already finished and published. So yeah.
Well, DSP republished the two I already had, and now January it'll be publishing the 15th additional one, so there'll be 17 altogether. So that's, I'm sure Mr. Well would love it if I could produce more, but that's not. Yeah, I'm about. I could do a little bit better for production, but not a whole lot. I just,
Have to sleep and eat food sometimes too. Yeah.
I have a life, wife and family, and just a lot of things I like to do and enjoy that don't involve writing. But writing is my escape. I love doing that. So. It's always been, it's therapeutic for me, in addition to being able to actually produce something on paper that people actually read and actually pay to read it. That's pretty cool.
Always a good feeling when the check comes through. Yes.
Oh yes. But and they've been pretty regular since I came to DSP, so I like that. So.
Absolutely. So when it comes to your books of 15 different, 17 books that you've published up till now, where would you have a reader start if they were to read one of your books?
Well, if they're interested in traditional Westerns, start all the way back at the beginning with my Walt Johnson series. Burning Vengeance was or Bitter Vengeance, I'm sorry, was my very first book to publish. And it is a just plain traditional Western. I have a 5-book Mountain Man series, Malachi Shepard, that started talking about me doing a Mountain Man, and I said, well, most people do it in the Rocky Mountains. Well, I don't know that much about the Rocky Mountains. I know a lot about the Appalachian Mountains. So that's where this one takes place. Literally starts where I grew up at. And I take the character around through different states and bring him back to that point. So it's not autobiographical, but a lot of the stuff that is in the book I have experienced. So if you're more into that, then that would certainly be the place to start.
Definitely. Well, I think the Malachi books actually were Malachi Shepard books were, I really liked them. The whole concept of doing an Appalachian Mountain Man was just like, oh yeah, that's something that most of our normal people don't take on, and that's going back in time a little bit further, but still.
Well, it was funny. Out of the blue, I got a email or a message from a girl I'd gone to high school with, hadn't seen her and heard from her in 50 years, literally. And she said, I just read your first Malachi book. And she said, it made me feel like I was at home, because she was no longer living in that area. She said, the way you describe the places, the things, it made me homesick, and I took that as a supreme compliment. So that was really special when I heard from her about that. So
Indeed. So begs kind of an obvious question here when it comes to that. What do you feel is the most important thing for writing a story?
I like character driven stuff. I like a character that is not perfect, a flawed character. Even if he is the hero of the book, he needs to have some flaws to make him more realistic. I know there's a lot of people in this business that demand that everything be just historically right, perfect. I'm writing fiction. I don't think it has to be perfect, but it's got to be real close. It's got to be believable. The time frame. You can't have a weapon that the guy's using that wasn't developed for 20 years or 50 years after that. You've got to do some research and be pretty realistic about that sort of stuff. And and it's got to be entertaining. People read to be entertained, read to escape. This crazy world we live in now, you've got to have a break from it every once in a while. And to me, a good Western is as good as it gets to get away from all that craziness. So
Certainly there. Do you keep the reader in mind when you're writing, or do you write primarily for yourself?
I have to say I write for myself. If I can believe it, if I don't feel like I cheated in any way to progress the story, then I feel like a lot of other people feel that way too.
Mhm.
I'm a veteran and I have a lot of readers that are veterans and you know, we're trying real hard to attract younger readers because I think that's the only way we're going to stay in this business. We gotta back up because guys like me are not going to be around too much longer. Um, so we can't put all our eggs in that basket. Uh, but basically, I have to be comfortable with it. I have to know that I did it right, and I believe that'll translate. I think that'll make people happy. So,
So when you're starting out getting a book going, what hits you first? Do you have an idea for a story, or do you have the idea for the character that you want to go into?
character. I start with a character, and yeah, I'm pretty old school. I handwrite everything first, and then I'll put it in the computer. And as I do that, I can edit, I can add, I can take away, and it just seems like I know this is trite, and you've probably heard it 100 times. I don't always know what's going to happen next. It just kind of happens. You'll get a conversation going, and something will pop. So, oh, well, I need to do this, or you'll go to a certain location. So, well, they can't do what I wanted them to do in that location, so I'm going to have to get them somewhere else over here. And it just kind of flows. Once you get in the groove, it's hard to stop sometimes. So, but I definitely character driven. That's the basis for everything I write, I believe. So,
Mhm. So at that point, where do you come up with the concepts for what the story is going to be about?
it like with well, I did some timbers, and that was kind of pretty much predetermined. He was going to be a U.S. Marshal, so where that's going. My first Walt Johnson was not a lawman. He was kind of a hot-headed rancher, and he had a brother that had gotten into some trouble, and he was friends with the sheriff, and the sheriff kept throwing him in jail to keep him out of trouble. So, but you just it just feels right when you get there. You take a guy that you thought about a little bit, and he's gonna behave a certain way in a certain circumstance. So you put him in that circumstance. Most of the time he behaves like you think he will. Sometimes he don't. So, but it's you just kind of go with the flow, I guess. So, uh, like with Malachi, I knew that he was going to end up having to leave home, and he did that to try to protect his grandparents. And then he went around, had all these other adventures. Then he ended up coming home to really protect his grandparents because they were technically under siege at that point in time. So, And that was what my last one, Blood Feud, was about, him coming back and taking care of business. Uh, so it just kind of flows. If you got the right character and you're doing the right things, it flows. He comes up with things he's going to do, and you just like stand back and write it down as you watch it. So
I've had many people say that they actually hear the people telling them what they're supposed to be writing and tell them when they're wrong and all that type of thing too.
yeah, I have dreamed scenes and things that I think that's got to be in there. I hadn't even thought about it before, but it came to me in the middle of the night in a dream or whatever. Get up and write it down and see what you can do with it. Flesh it out a little bit and run. So
Indeed. And speaking of fleshing things out, what are you working on? I understand it's going to be something that Nick is very excited about over at DSP, and he said, "Well, it definitely make him talk about what's coming up." And to my knowledge, I don't even have a title for it yet. So, what can you tell us?
well, it's going to be the character is his name is Dalton Briscoe, and he is a gunfighter. He basically is a gun for hire, and he's in this first episode, in the first book, which will be out in January. He gets involved. He tries not to take sides unless he is getting paid a lot to do it, and he ends up in this one taking sides because of some personal reasons, some things that happens, and from here, he's just going to travel around the West and find situations where his gun will make him a living. He's not adverse to killing people. He feels like he kills people that need to be killing, but that's dependent on whose point of view you're talking about, I guess. So he makes that determination himself, and he does some bad things, and he does overall mostly good stuff, but he's not going to be your typical white hat character. So been wanting to do something like this for a while, and it just the way things fell into place. Malachi's kind of resting for a while, and Timber's kind of gone off in other directions with other authors, and it just seemed like a good time to start it. When I approached Nick about it, absolutely go for it. So um,
Now, if
he
it's got a
does,
gunman in it, typically Nick likes it.
yeah, and he been very supportive, and I think it's got the potential to do really well. I'm always excited about what I'm writing, but this one's a little special to me. After the Malachi stuff I really got into that because of the location and places that I took him. But this one I think it's got the potential to do really something good. So,
What made you come up with the character for him?
um, we in some of our meetings we talked about bounty hunters, and we talked about lawmen are always a big thing in the westerns, and I didn't really want to go in either of those directions, and so I thought, well, let's get somebody that kind of splits the splits the hair between the two. He's not exactly a lawman, but he does enforce some things, and he's not exactly a super bad guy. He's not robbing banks and stuff, but just somebody that's kind of like the old have gun will travel type thing, the paladin type thing. I won't put him at that level yet, but who knows, we might get him there eventually. So.
Always is plenty popular for many, many years on Have Gun Will Travel. So yeah, always a good thing to emulate.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's the thing we end up doing. Everybody wants to come up with something original. Kind of hard to do. It's not the premise that needs to be original. It's the way you present it that you have to turn it a little bit here and turn it a little bit there, and do something a little different with it. I like to have some pretty good storyline in my books. It's not just always just shoot them up. Sometimes that's what readers want, but other times they want a little storyline to keep things flowing, keep them interested in what's happening to the characters. That's the best way to do it. So
in the Malachi books, you were basically going through and discussing, home, the land, the areas you knew, and that type of thing. Where does this one take place?
This one starts in Arizona.
Ah, okay.
It's a little copper mining town. It's where he actually just drifted there, and then from here, I'm not sure where he goes, but he's going to be kind of all over the West, as different places, different situations he finds. And sometimes I feel like he'll be contacted and asked to come to these places. Other times he'll just show up, just as he drifts through the West, he'll find him something that interests him and that he can make a little money doing. So, and he's not really a cow puncher. That's not his thing, but he's really good with a gun. So that's how he makes his living. So,
Was your methodology different for writing this than your previous books?
not really. Again, it's the character that I imagined, and I'm just trying to, as you said, flesh him out a little bit and give him certain personality traits that I think would work for a person like that. He can't be super tender-hearted or anything like that. And he has that side, but that's not what drives him. He's more cold-blooded than that. So uh,
And you're dropping it into a whole different part of the country than the Appalachians on this whole
right,
thing.
right.
Did you have to prepare yourself for Arizona or figure out and do research on it? What
I
all?
did do some research, but now my first Walt Johnson's, they do take place in Arizona as well. But this was a little different because of the copper mining and all that. I had to do some research on that and get a feel for what part of the state that, happened in and some of the process that they had to go through. So it's, you, you got to do some research. You got to, like I said, to keep it in that realm of possibility, even though it's fiction, it's still got to come under that umbrella of believable, so
Absolutely.
yeah,
So that's coming out here, starting up the new year. So
right,
nice
right.
post Christmas on everything here with all of that, definitely.
Absolutely. I guess I should write it. I don't know. I've been telling Nick all about it. I probably should sit down and write it too. He'd probably appreciate that. So
So
it's,
what bit of advice would you give to somebody who's starting out trying to write? Uh, what's the best thing you could tell somebody who wants to become a writer?
again, this is kind of trite, but right. Get something down on paper. It's so easy to talk yourself out of doing it. And there's got to be a certain amount of discipline. If you can find a certain time every day to do it, that's great. Most of us can't really do that, but you got to be able to give it some time, and just don't sit looking at a blank piece of paper. Put some kind of words down there, and more often than not, it'll start flowing. Uh, I know feel like there is such a thing as writer's block, but I've never tremendously experienced it. Like I said, I kind of take my own advice. I sit and look and just start putting the words together, and hopefully it'll spur, get something going in my mind, and I can do something with it. So um, don't be afraid to write. Don't be afraid to try to get your stuff published. There's a lot of different ways to do it nowadays. With DSP, it's fairly painless, so that's good. Um, I don't think I have the discipline to self-publish anything. So, but I know that is a way a lot of people go. But I like the fact that pretty much all I have to do is write, and that's I've worked hard all my life to get to this point. I don't want to have to continue to put in all those hours, trying to make something happen when I got somebody like Nick I can rely on to make all that stuff happen for me. So that's yeah.
We like to keep things simple and have it so you can just write and
Absolutely.
move the stories forward and keep them coming out. And
Sure.
sometimes as fast as humanly possible. But
Exactly. Or maybe when it's not humanly possible, he'd be okay with that too. So
we aspire to inhuman, yes. So where can people learn more about you and about your books?
Amazon. I have an author page on Amazon that has a short bio, and all my books are there. Like I said, there's 16, and this will make 17. And one of them is a short. It's actually when I first came to DSP, Nick said, "Give me something about 10,000 words." I think he was just testing me to see if I could do it. So I gave it, he liked it, published it, and I think my mom bought a copy, and maybe, I don't know, my wife might have bought one, but I'm not sure about that. So
Very true. Well, thank you for joining us today, Malcolm. I appreciate you taking the time to be
oh,
interviewed, and I am looking forward to your new book coming out here.
well, I'm pretty excited about it too. And thank you so much for taking the time to interview me, and good talking to you finally. So
Yeah, it's a pleasure after, boy, making covers for you since, so yeah,
been a while, yeah, but I appreciate it very much. Good talking to you.
very good. Thank you very much.
All right, Kevin, take care.